Max Verstappen stuns McLaren once again to claim pole position for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix as Lando Norris crashes out in Q3. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Golding, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks with another spectacular background. But Ian, we've got to get straight into it. So much to discuss from what is one of my favourite qualifying sessions of the year, every year since Saudi Arabia has joined their calendar. We've got to begin with Lando Norris, who came into this weekend saying he needed a reset after Bahrain, and of course some of the mistakes he made there. He went and topped FP2. He went and topped FP3. Entered qualifying, really, in my eyes, as the slight favourite, goes and crashes in Q3 on his first hot lap and will now start at best in P10. But you've got to imagine he's going to bed now praying that that gearbox is not broken.
Now, all's good on that. I can quickly reaffirm that. Just come back, actually, as we're doing this video, folks, literally just come back from Andrea Stella's media session, the McLaren team principal. And of course, naturally, he was asked, was there any damage? What's the damage to the car? Andrea has confirmed that they're good to go. It will be fine to start from 10th on the grid. It's just a case of, they've got a lot of repairs to naturally carry out, but the car will be in the same specification. No untoward kind of changes to the chassis or any other body parts. So yes, absolutely fine on that. Lando Norris will start from 10th on the grid. So that's that one out of the way very quickly. What comes to mind straight away for me, Nick, was the point I raised, or one of the comments I aired in the post-practice update on Friday night. And I said to you that given the way Lando had come into this weekend, you could see he'd had that reset. He'd gone away, challenged himself, and came into this weekend looking fully focused, fully on it. And yes, Friday qualifying was a great session. Naturally, you can never read too much into Friday qualifying, as we know, but nevertheless, run plan went to plan. McLaren came out of it quite happy. And I said to you, as long as Lando did not make any mistakes, then he would be looking good for, if not pole position, then certainly front row at best. And as you pointed out, McLaren certainly looked fantastic in FP3. Again, you can't read too much into practice times. Nevertheless, they were nearly 7/10 of a second clear of their nearest rival, which in that instance was George Russell in his Mercedes. And what do we get? Lando Norris making a mistake at the start of Q3, after which I am going to use his words because he came out with them over the radio, so it is a swear word, folks, just to let you know. Described himself as a fucking idiot. And he was asked about that in his post-qualifying written media pen session. And he basically didn't back down from it. He reiterated the phrase. And yeah, here we go. He's going to be on the back foot, 10th position, as we know, on the grid, with Max on a sensational pole position once again. We didn't think he could get any better after what he produced at Suzuka ahead of the Japanese Grand Prix. And of course, Oscar Piastri, his teammate, on the front row in second position. So it looks at this stage that the one surefire certainty coming out of Sunday's Saudi Arabian Grand Prix is that Lando Norris will not be in the lead of the Drivers' Championship come the end of the 50 laps, barring any great catastrophe to befall either Max or Oscar over the course of the race.
What's remarkable, and I love the fact you've just said that, because should Max and Oscar finish how they're starting in first and second, Max will actually leave the triple header leading the Drivers' Championship. I don't think anybody would have had money on that going into the triple header back into Suzuka. Fair play if you did. Please pick my lottery numbers for next week. But we've got to discuss Max, because I'm actually loving the way he's being this year. He's almost being quite comical, quite jokey with the media in regards to he knows he's not got the best car. He's very much this season the hunter rather than the hunted in Lando's case. And FP3 Red Bull looked okay, came out and spoke to Sky saying that he immediately looked at the FP3 monitor, shut it off, closed it, thought McLaren were on another planet, and then goes and delivers a lap record of the Jeddah Corniche circuit. He called it simply lovely. But I've got to say, I think he's been modest, having seen the onboards of the way he wrestled the RB21.
Unbelievable.
It was simply spectacular.
simply sensational, simply spectacular. What, even
Yeah.
Helmut Marko in his speaking to media afterwards, even he has run out of superlatives, as you put it, to throw at Max Verstappen, because what he's doing with that car is beyond extraordinary.
Yeah.
We saw it in Japan. We've seen it again here. Okay, Max turned around and said, he saw the gap to McLaren, and he was 0.845 seconds adrift of Lando Norris at the end of FP3. And even he thought, this one's gone, folks. In fairness, and I'm going to refer to Andrea Stella again, he said, look, don't read into the practice times. We could see, okay, we don't know the actual specifics of engine modes and fuel loads, but we have a damn good idea because we've got an enormous bank of strategists and tacticians and engineers looking at the on-track data. We knew that both George Russell and Max Verstappen were close. Well, they were not only close. In Max's case, he was above and beyond. And once again, we saw him deliver. I think I used Lap of the Gods in Japan, Nick. I think I'm going to have to use Lap of the
You did.
Gods again. And most certainly, what Max did in that car, whatever happened in 2021 when we thought we were seeing one of the all-time great pole position laps, only to be taken away by a crash at the final corner. Well, this time round, he completed that lap and then some to finish 0.010 seconds ahead of Oscar Piastri. That gives you some ideas to just how close it was, but that also gives you some ideas to just how damn good Max Verstappen is in that RB21. Just another class performance. Difference here is this is a very different circuit to Suzuka. We know that. Suzuka proved incredibly difficult to pass. Here, we know there are opportunities. We know the DRS zone does work to a better effect than it will in Suzuka. We also know what this circuit can lend itself to in terms of yellow flags, safety car, red flags. So there is so much yet that could take place across this Grand Prix compared to the banal nature of the way the Japanese Grand Prix unfolded. And in the end, it was only McLaren's relatively safe strategy that allowed Max to win that Grand Prix, albeit, don't get me wrong, Max still put in one hell of a performance to keep his car ahead of the McLarens at the end of the day. But yes, I'm sure looking ahead to Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, there is so much more going to unfold that we do not know the full tale of just yet.
And we're hopefully going to get to see Max Verstappen against Oscar Piastri, something I'm really intrigued to see. And Oscar, it must be a weird feeling for him because second on the grid with Lando in 10th, he must be thinking, okay, this is pretty good. But actually, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, with Max alongside him, if he finishes behind Max, regardless of where Lando is, Oscar still won't move into the lead of the standings. He's got to feel a little bit weird coming out of qualifying.
Yeah, you would assume that when he saw Lando crash, and bearing in mind he'd already got in a good banker lap as well, and he was the only driver to do so. And we're going to actually get onto a little bit about the way qualifying strategy unfolded, in particular on Max Verstappen's side. You would have thought, I've got a really, really, really good chance here of nailing pole position. However, let's now move into what unfolded over that qualifying period, because all credit to what Red Bull decided to pull off, and that was they fueled Max's car for 2 fast laps. So what happened was they decided, as Max was already on a lap when the session was stopped, that they decided to continue on with that tyre for the first of those laps, get in that banker lap, as I say, because a lot of other teams and drivers decided to play it safe. They didn't go out and do an initial push lap and then come in and do like Red Bull did and change tyres and go out again. What Red Bull did do was they put Max on the same set of tyres, fueled him for 2 laps, brought him straight in, pit stop straight away, fresh set of rubber, and that really allowed him then on that fresh set of soft tyres, because the car was warmed up, because he was warmed up, he got a sighter around that track in those conditions and with a lower fuel to absolutely nail that brilliant lap that he did right at the end. And as I say, just 0.010 seconds. So not only was the brilliance of Max Verstappen brought into evidence, but quite clearly the strategy team at Red Bull as well absolutely nailed it for him to deliver once again another superb qualifying performance.
The finest of margins, but the margins are in the favour of Red Bull and Max Verstappen. What's fascinating though about Q3 and the best lap times at the end was that each sector time was topped by a different driver. Max Verstappen set the fastest first sector, George Russell set the fastest second sector, Oscar Piastri set the fastest third sector, showing actually that over one lap, McLaren's advantage really isn't as big as many, I think, expected going into not only this weekend, but this season in general, although it is the long run pace where McLaren do seem to have a bigger edge according to a lot of the teams. But George Russell, once again in third, he's probably getting a bit sick and tired of that position. It feels that's where he's spending majority of the year so far. But again, super by George, P3, although did accept the McLaren, Mercedes, should I say, thought about Max Verstappen's strategy and actually ruse a little bit. They didn't go for it.
Yeah, actually, his comment said that Mercedes didn't think about it at all. And in hindsight, the Mercedes strategists are probably now thinking,
Yeah,
that was actually
should
damn
have done.
good of Red Bull. Maybe we should have done the same. But obviously, it is what it is. Hindsight's 2020 vision is a wonderful thing, as we all know. Nevertheless, George can be really proud of his performance, just a tenth of a second off Max and Oscar on that front row. So he's got a lot to play for because he knows what's at stake around this circuit. If Max and Oscar trip up over one another, then he's going to be in pole position to take full advantage. But we all know this Grand Prix, it's a patience game. Even if those opportunities don't come right at the start with any potential incidents, safety cars, red flags, as I say, they could happen at any given time around this track because of the way things could evolve over the course of the 50 laps. So I still think, and I really hope I'm right in this, Nick, that there's going to be a lot more to come and we could see a number of incidents yet.
I have a feeling you might be correct. Just to very quickly run through the top 10 for the grid for the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. It is, of course, Max Verstappen on pole position with Piastri in second, George Russell in third, Charles Leclerc lining up in fourth, Kimi Antonelli in fifth, Carlos Sainz in sixth for Williams, Lewis Hamilton seventh, Yuki Tsunoda in eighth, Pierre Gasly P9, and of course Lando Norris P10. Moving on to Ferrari, and as I mentioned there, Leclerc P4, Hamilton P7, which on paper sounds okay. However, Lewis Hamilton, 6/10, just over 6/10, actually slower than Leclerc for back-to-back qualifying sessions behind Carlos Sainz, of all people as well. I mean, we said in yesterday's headline, post-Friday, bad day for Hamilton because he ended Friday down in P13, was not really no better in FP3. Where does he go from here? Because it's quite clear that he's not really settling into this SF25, is much slower than the McLaren. Justin himself feels quite similar to how he was coming across to the media last season with Mercedes, actually.
There's just no pace in that car at the minute, and
No.
that was something that that Charles Leclerc mentioned. Charles said that he's found the sweet spot of the car. Yeah. If that's the sweet spot, and that car is still, 3.5 tenths of a second away from Max and Oscar on the front row, that
Not
just
good.
goes to show that the pace is not there at the minute. And of course, with Lewis Hamilton further back, losing a huge chunk of time, I noticed noticeably in the first sector and the third sector, pretty much on par with Charlotte across the middle sector. But nevertheless, first sector has really, really played hell, shall we say, with Lewis Hamilton over the course of this weekend so far. It very much is now going to be looking forward, he mentioned when I asked him in the pen session, to going back to the factory, really deep dive into the data, into the car, trying to work out just what he can do better, not only within himself, but also what more can he do to extract out of that car. Because at the moment, that pole position for the sprint race in China aside, he has pretty much been nowhere in qualifying across the course of the season and has really struggled in comparison to Charles, of course, his teammate. So I can imagine there's still a lot to play for Lewis. Who knows, again, what opportunities, what chances might unfold across the course of the Grand Prix. But yes, coming out of this Grand Prix weekend, at least then, there is an opportunity, a gap to go back to Maranello and to really try and get on top of things going forward then into the Miami Grand Prix weekend, following which, of course, there'll be another gap before we face another triple header. We get into the European part of the season, starting with Imola, Monaco, and of course Barcelona, all back to back. So we know that when we get to Imola, the majority of the teams, that is likely to be the last big upgrade opportunity. So we will see whether Ferrari has been able to make any inroads from here in Saudi Arabia going forward to just a few weeks' time at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix in Imola.
Just finally, Ian, we've got to discuss Lance Stroll, someone who we don't speak about very often. However,
No,
he
not at
did
all.
claim a bit of an unwanted record. He has officially been eliminated in Q1 more than any other driver in F1 history. But to his credit, it's got to be said, he took it pretty well.
Yeah, that's 75 times now Lance Stroll has exited Q1 across the course of his career, exceeding the previous best that had been set by Haas driver Kevin Magnussen. So, yes, I did say that as soon as that happened, I said to myself, and I posted the message in our Slack channel, I'm going to ask Lance about this, because I'd be remiss of me as a journalist not to do so, regardless of what response might come my way, whether he decided to give it short shrift and walk away. In fairness, he did answer the question, and he actually heard over the track tannoy that he got that record. So some form of commentary that was being played out, an unwanted record quite naturally. And at least he was relatively amenable. He basically turned around and said, well, if you put the McLaren drivers in the Sauber, for argument's sake, they'd probably be out in Q1 as many times as I've been over the course of my career. So there was a little bit of levity from Lance towards the question in the end. So fair play to him, because the one thing about Lance Stroll, and you may not know this, folks, that when it comes to the written media pen sessions, Lance is usually very quickly in and very quickly out again. So much so that we often play Lance Stroll bingo and work out how many seconds Lance is going to be conducting his media pen session. More often than not, it's less than a minute. On this occasion, fair play, it was just under 2 minutes.
Yeah, on this occasion, he gave a really good answer. Give him credit. Ian, amazing stuff, as always. Moi, don't know what language that is, my friend. Awesome background. Don't know where it's come from. I do love that background, but it's nice, a little like Saudi Arabian crown going on. I'm looking forward to see what you managed to sort for tomorrow. And of course, for those watching this F1 update, be sure to let us know in the comment section below your thoughts on qualifying, who you think is going to win the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and let us know where you think Lando Norris is going to recover to. If you can also smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, that would be absolutely perfect. From Ian and I, we will see you on Sunday following the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. See you later.
Enjoy it, folks, and we'll catch you afterwards. Take care until then.